Okay, so now we have to do a little bit of tweaking to ActiveAdmin. The end goal, remember, is to lock access to this area so that only admin users can get access to it. So then for one, we don't actually have the notion of admin users in our app yet. We just have all users, and they're all kind of the same. So I'm going to walk you through a few steps for how to do this. Now it gets a little bit complicated and in the weeds, and so you're not going to understand some of this stuff. This isn't really Rails that I'm about to do as much as it is just ActiveAdmin customization stuff. And you want to try to separate those two ideas in your head, that we want to learn how to use Rails, but when it comes to using certain libraries like Devise or ActiveAdmin, some of them just come with their own special ways of doing stuff that you learn by just reading ActiveAdmin's documentation. Remember, if you search ActiveAdmin, all of this stuff that I'm about to do, I found basically by going through the links in the documentation for ActiveAdmin and going to stuff like authorization. This is basically where you set up authorization for admin users. So just follow along for now, and once we get this out of the way, we can actually get into the actual guts of Rails and show you how to build cool stuff from there. But admin sections are important because almost every app will have them. So the first change you need to make is go into your config application.rb, and you actually need to type in at the bottom here. This is right after the comment, but before these two end lines. And you can copy this in from below. What you need to do is type config.app_generators.scaffold controller equals scaffold controller, and that should actually fill in for you. So copy it in like this. This actually has nothing to do with the admin user authorization, but this is because we installed inherited resources, which we needed for ActiveAdmin. The problem with this inherited resources gem is it replaces some feature we're going to use later called scaffolding. And if we didn't do this, we'd notice later that the thing we're trying to do doesn't work. So this actually will prevent that from happening. So that's the first thing. And if you've added this line to application.rb, you're fine. Otherwise, pause the video and do that now. And then you can close this application.rb out. The rest of the actual customization is going to happen inside of an initializer inside of config. Initializers are a bunch of Ruby files that get run when your app is first started. You start it when you run Rails server, or it gets started on Heroku. And there's one in here called ActiveAdmin, and this is actually where you can do some of the customization of things, such as the site title that shows up here. You can replace that. A lot of these are commented out. So if you read through the comments, it actually shows you how you can do stuff, such as set an optional image to be displayed for the header. And usually it'll show you with text, and then it'll actually put a line of code. And if you wanted to run a line of code, you would just go through and you would delete this £, which then makes the code actually run. But that's not the one that I want. The one that I want to change, there's a few of them. I want you to find, first of all, this line 89, and uncomment this by getting rid of that pound in the space. So it should look like this, but we actually need to change this method. So instead of config current user method current admin user, it should just be current_user. So that's the first thing change. The reason we're doing this is because Devise actually gives us a function called current user, which we can use to figure out who the current user is, who's logged in. And so now ActiveAdmin will know I need to use that function, and that's kind of what you're doing here for figuring out who the current user is. The next change will be to on line 57. This basically decides, no, it's not line 57, sorry. It is here, authorization adapter. What we're going to do is we're basically going to create our own authorization adapter. And what that means is you can plug in different kind of ways of doing what's called authorization in your app, which is basically who gets to do what. And there's a few different gems for this. There's CanCan, there's Pundit. We're actually going to kind of be creating our own. But when you build big applications and you have to deal with all these different things that you need to control access to for different users, it makes sense to check out some of these other authorization tools. But for now, we're going to create our own authorization adapter. And so we replace this with quotes. And in here, we put admin authorization. And we're actually going to create something called an admin authorization adapter. Now, how do I do this? Well, I can basically go into my models, and I'm going to create a new model inside of here, a new file. But I'll save this as admin_authorization.rb. And inside of here, I'm going to put, let me check to make sure this is the right place. Yes. OK. Setting your own authorization adapter. I'm kind of following these instructions a little bit. I was just checking to make sure it needs to be inside your models, which it does. So we're going to call this class admin authorization. And this little left arrow, this is called inheritance. So it's actually inheriting from another object, admin authorization adapter. This is because ActiveAdmin gives you a general class to inherit from, which just basically gives it a few setup pieces that it includes by default. We're basically at this point kind of creating a lot like the other things, except that this, the setup at the top is a little different. And this file only needs to have one thing in it. It needs to have a function called authorized with a question mark at the end. And in parentheses in this function, it's going to take two arguments, action and subject, although you'll put in a nil there. So that actually sets up a default. And then you do end. And then inside of here, what this is doing basically is whenever someone tries to log into the admin section, we're going to call this function to see if they're allowed to do it. And so what we need to do first is check, is the user logged in? That's what this is going to do. It's going to call current user. And is the user an admin? That's it. This is how our authentication is going to work. As long as there's a user and they are an admin, they're allowed to access the backend. So right now, with the little that we have set up, this should work so far. There's a little bit more customization that we have to do. The first is here on line 80. On unauthorized access, we will call a function. So let's uncomment out that line. Access denied is the fine name of a function. And we're going to create basically the function, what happens when a user tries to access a page when it's denied. For right now, it doesn't know what to do. It'll know that, okay, unauthorized access happened, but what do we do with that? The place that we call this function is inside of the application controller. And we're right now exploring a lot of parts of the app, and it's going to be a little confusing, so just stick with me. We're defining a function here called access denied, and it takes an argument of exception. And you always end a function whenever you define one. And then inside of here, we are actually doing a redirect to the root path, root underscore path. So when the user tries to access a page they can't, we're going to redirect them to the home page with an alert, and the alert will have the exception message. So it'll actually put the message up on the home page for, for whatever happened. So there's this, and then there's, I believe, two other things that we have to tweak, which are kind of related. I'll first show you how this is working so far. Because we changed the initializer, we have to restart the server if we want to see the changes. Undefined method admin. So right now, basically, it knows a user's logged in, but when I call user.admin, it doesn't know what that means. So that's the thing I'm going to show you how to do in the next video, is how do you actually make some users admins and some users not admins. But before I do that, there's two final changes I want to make inside of this ActiveAdmin file. And one is change the logout link path. So there's going to be a link to logout in the admin section. And we're going to just actually point this to the devise logout path, which is destroy user session path, not destroy admin user session path. And then the final change is here on line 107, config logout link method needs to be delete instead of get or whatever. Okay, so those changes, and next I'm actually going to show you how you can set up basically this whole admin user thing.